Okay, so moving on to the business at hand.
Madam Moderator,
Yes, Mr. Leahy.
I'd like to make a motion that we go a little bit out of order and take Articles 23 and 24 prior to taking Articles 21 and 22, with the goal being to move along quickly on these first two, Articles 23 and 24.
Second.
So that motion requires a 2/3 majority to pass. And so I will take that vote now. So this would be to take out of order Articles 23 and 24, but in order that they are, so 23 first, and then return to Articles 21 and 22. So all in favor of taking those two articles out of order, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Okay, passes. So we will take those two articles out of order. So Article 23, Governance Task Force.
Madam Moderator,
Yes, Ms. Reliff.
I move the town vote to allow the moderator, after consultation with the Board of Selectmen, to appoint a task force entitled Governance Task Force 2 of 5 registered voters to recommend changes to the town bylaws dealing with the governance after both considering the recommendations in the DOR and Collins reports and exploring the structure of towns in eastern Massachusetts, which they judge to be somewhat similar in size and well and creatively run. Preferably, each of the task force members will have competency, experience in one or more of the following areas: organizational structures, finance, and human resources. Further, that the task force report back to the town within 9 months, such report to include draft warrant article for the town to consider at a subsequent town meeting.
Second.
Is there, I believe there is a presentation on this, Grace?
Yeah.
I hope this is brief. I just want to give you a little bit of history. In 2011 and 12, there were 2 reports originated by this town. One, SOS brought an article to town meeting, and the DOR was requested to do a study of Sherborn. And the late Selectman Tom Twining had the idea of going to the Collins Institute at the UMass in Boston, and they did another excellent report on the town government in Sherborn. Based on those 2 articles, wishing to see those suggestions reviewed and perhaps implemented, at the 2013 town meeting, a governance task force was created. In 2014, heeding the need for coming back to town meeting within 9 months, they brought articles to town meeting which resulted in the Board of Selectmen being expanded to 15 members and the town administrator having expanded responsibilities and powers. In 2015, the governance task force had asked to be extended for 1 year, and they brought back another article which led to the town accountant also being the financial director of the town, and that was accepted by town meeting in 2015. And then the Governance Task Force 1 was sunsetted. Our request for Governance Task Force 2, the article uses exactly the same language as for Governance Task Force 1, with the addition of language suggesting now that so much time has passed, perhaps they could look beyond just the two studies and look at several towns around here which are considered very well run and see if there are things to be learned. We think we were very, very well served by the first task force. We do not think that there are horrendous problems, but we think there are probably some issues that could be tackled and some greater efficiencies added to our town government. I hope that you find this a good idea and support the vote.
Are there any other comments or debate on this? Kitty?
Kitty Sturgis, is this on?
It doesn't sound it,
Okay,
Kitty.
sorry.
I can't hear myself talk.
I don't think it's on, Kitty.
Okay, how do you turn it on? Okay, I guess you, I would like to encourage people here tonight to support this article. I had the honor of serving on the past committee. I had 4 wonderful gentlemen to work with, and we learned a lot about surrounding towns and even going further afield. So I think it doesn't hurt to review our town. It doesn't mean they're going to be able to bring something forward, but it's a good idea. Thank you.
Thank you, Kitty. Yes, Paul?
Don't touch the mic.
Just talk.
The Board of Selectmen voted unanimously 4-0 to recommend adoption of this article.
Is there any further debate? Okay, so this is a majority vote. So I would say all in favor of Article 23, Governance Task Force 2, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Passes unanimously. I am actually the sponsor of Article 24 along with Town Clerk Carol Marple, and so I need to leave the stage for this article, and I'll be making a presentation about it after the motion is made. Taking my place here, many of you will recognize our former and much highly regarded moderator, Corey Lincoln, so I welcome her back to town meeting. And she is graciously handling this for me. Thanks very much, Corey.
Let me assure you that I have been sworn in by the town clerk. I'm legal. Article 24 is about electronic voting. It's to establish a committee to explore the possibility of electronic voting at town meeting. And passage of this will require a simple majority.
Madam Moderator,
Mr. Waldron,
I move the town vote to establish a committee appointed jointly by the Board of Selectmen and Town Moderator to investigate options for electronic voting for the use at future town meetings. Membership on the committee will include 1 at-large member and 2 members with backgrounds and verifiable experience in IT, other appropriate technologies. The town clerk and the town moderator will be ex officio members. The committee will provide a detailed report to the moderator and the Board of Selectmen, delineating options available for EV and specific costs to Sherborn for each option available. And that the report shall be submitted to the moderator and the Board of Selectmen no later than November 2nd, 2018, or take any other action relative thereto.
thank you.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. I believe we'll begin with the presentation. Yes.
Friendly amendment to remove the wording or take any action relative thereto that was a typo.
Okay. Is that acceptable? A friendly amendment to take that, to be a language about,
Take any action relative thereto. That was not supposed to be there.
Yes.
is that acceptable? Okay. Yes, our presentation.
Yes.
The amendment, if I may, was to
Oh, sure.
remove the words "or to take any other action relative thereto" from the very end of that article.
It was a drafting error in the motion. It was a carry forward from what's in the article. Okay.
Great. So, good evening. Okay, yeah.
Want me out of the way?
Yeah, please. Okay, so this article looks to establish a committee to look into options for the use of electronic voting at our town meetings. Electronic voting, as you may well be familiar with it, is the use of a device that resembles a TV clicker to record votes. When the moderator calls the vote, the voter presses a key to register either aye or nay. There's not a need to call twice for ayes and nays. You simply click, the votes are totaled, and the result is displayed on the screen within about 20 seconds. Why might Sherborn be interested in this? Well, it's fast, for one thing. Each vote takes about 20 seconds. It allows more time for substantive debate, if there is such a debate about to take place, and otherwise it simply speeds the length of the meeting. It is accurate. It eliminates the need for the moderator to call voice votes. I don't know if you noticed this last night, but it was very obvious on the stage when we called voice votes that were very close. They sounded very close. When we went to, so close that we went to cards, when we went to cards, they were not very close at all. So, you know, why is that? Well, maybe the nays hear how loud the ayes are and they just try to be louder. I don't know. Maybe the people, when they see how the thing is going, they change their mind when they vote with a card. I don't know. Or maybe people feel they vote differently when their voice is mixed in with everyone else's versus when they have to kind of stand there with their card up. So I don't know the answers to those questions, but those are all possibilities. So it makes the vote accurate and reflective of what people really feel. And finally, it is private. Your vote at town meeting is as private as your vote on a ballot wherever you vote. So how much does it cost? Those of you who know me from the advisory committee know that I'm always was interested in how much does it cost. So it depends. There are a variety of options for implementing these systems. Some towns purchase, some towns do a multi-year lease, some towns do a one-time rental if they're anticipating a particularly difficult meeting. There are different costs and benefits to each. And the point is we need to research all of this and determine if electronic voting is right for our town, both as a process in itself and while weighing the cost-benefit ratio. The charge for the committee would be to research the options and costs, report back to the Board of Selectmen, myself, and the clerk, or whoever is the moderator at that time, sorry, for an assessment to be made with respect to putting a possible article on the warrant for ATM 2019, so a year from now. The committee would be composed of 2 members with significant IT or related technology experience, 1 at-large member, and the clerk and I would be ex officio members of that committee. Thank you.
I didn't get a chance to gavel her for going over 5 minutes. Is there any debate or questions? If not, we'll proceed to the vote. All those in favor of the motion, please say aye. Aye. Those opposed, nay. Nay. Motion passes.
Okay, moving on now to Article 22. I'm sorry, Article 21. This is a zoning article of photovoltaic facilities, solar farms.
Madam Moderator,
Yes, Mr. Sy.
I move the town vote to take no action on Article 21.
I second that.
Right. John Higley from the Planning Board has a few words to say.
John Higley, 14 Saddlebrook Road, Chairman of the Planning Board. The Planning Board considered this article at the request of a property owner. It turned out several property owners were interested in it, so we spent a lot of time. There was a lot of public input. And Sherborn is a green community. We have had our own solar program. We've got solar panels on the CMD roof. So a lot of citizens have put solar panels on, so we're really in favor of solar. Sherborn has a solar photovoltaic overlay district that was part of our green community requirement that enables a large-scale installation in a specified area. So we already have that. The specified area is the transfer station, and so we've met all the requirements for the state. The state office, the Massachusetts Office of Energy and Environmental Affairs, their Department of Energy Resources, advises the creation of that overlay district. We've done that. To enable large-scale installations in other areas is what we're talking about with this article. And we tortured over it, but the state itself, the DOER, recommends that first consider solar on rooftops. The second choice is disturbed land, such as a landfill or a gravel pit or paved surface. The last choice is very much discouraged. It's very much discouraged to use farmland and woodland. And we have an overlay district that doesn't require using farmland and woodland. So in this article, 5.10.12, citing by the special permit, C says no more than 10% of the facility may be located on land that has been actively farmed or woodland within the last 5 years. We felt that was really necessary to comply with our own vision for Sherborn. We really want to protect farmland and woodland, and we also, of course, want to promote renewable energy, but not at the expense of farmland and woodland. So we put that in there. The proponents and the planning board discussed this and agreed that this article should not work. So the planning board voted 5-0 to not recommend this article.
Thank you. Is there discussion? Robert?
Good evening, Robert Johnson, 272 Western Avenue. And I'm delighted that Sherborn is a community. The selectmen apparently are also delighted that Sherborn is a green community. And I think the planning board is delighted that Sherborn is a green community, and I suspect that the Conservation Commission is also delighted, and I expect that a large number of people here in this room are also pleased with that. I do find it interesting that when people think of green, that they think of trying to find alternatives to fossil fuels and ways to generate electricity without using fossil fuels. And I find it interesting that the town has chosen not to really in any way support, other than the extremely limited things that were just mentioned, any way to support either a solar farm or a wind farm. And I just wonder if maybe it's inconvenient. Thank you.
Is there any other comment or debate? Okay, I will
Mary?
note, I'm sorry.
Mary.
I'm sorry,
Yeah.
I didn't see
Karen
you.
Masterson,
Sure,
32
Karen.
Russet Hill Road. I would just like to offer up some information about solar in that I see it shifting pretty significantly as we move into solar for roof applications, solar for window applications. And I think the big push for the solar farm on large spaces will be obsolete fairly quickly. Tesla's moving towards a solar, like a solar roof tile. And I think once that kicks in, these large-scale farms could be problematic. So I think it's very wise that we're holding off, because I think if we had done this 15 years ago, it's one thing, but I think right now there's a real shift in the technology that we're going to see in the next few years.
Does the Board of Selectmen wish to say anything?
We had voted in agreement with passing this over for this town meeting.
Is there any other comment or discussion? Okay, then I would just remind you that the motion that has been made is a negative motion. That is a motion for no action. So if you are in favor of no action, in other words, defeating this article, you will vote aye on this. If you are in favor of the article and against the advisory motion, you would vote nay. Right. This is a zoning article, and so it requires a 2/3. This is.
It is, but the motion is also.
Oh, right, I'm sorry, yes. So it will be a majority vote. So again, to support the advisory motion to take no action, you would vote aye, otherwise nay. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Passes unanimously. Article 22, open space development.
Madam Moderator,
Mr. Williams.
I move the town vote to amend the zoning bylaw as shown under Article 22 in the Planning Board handout provided at the April 24, 2018 town meeting, and further to authorize the town clerk in consultation with the town administrator to make such ministerial amendments to the numbering of said bylaw, including insertion of numbering and lettering for sections and subsections as may be necessary to bring such bylaw into accord with the zoning bylaw numbering system.
Second.
We have a presentation now from Marion Neutra from the Planning Board.
Right, thank you. Marion Neutra, 25 Prospect Street. Can you hear me? Thanks. 25 Prospect Street, speaking for the Planning Board. This article is toward the goal of guiding our future housing development while still preserving open space. And it's based on the premise that open space is more than just scenic views, although we all enjoy that. It's important to all of us for recharge of water resources, filtering of our well water, and for climate control, especially in the summer and especially in the face of oncoming climate change. It's important to realize that much of Sherborn's current open space, upon which we all depend, is actually private property. And there's nothing wrong with this, but there are many properties that are 10 acres or more that are privately held, not conserved. And there are over 24 properties that are over 20 acres, some as large as 100. So collectively, private property makes a big contribution to Sherborn's open space benefits. And of course, property owners have a right to sell. And when properties come on the market, developers have a right to buy. And typically, a large property, as you see on the screen, would be attractive to developers for subdivision development. So state and local laws have evolved over the years to promote, I should say, subdivision development is generally considered conventional subdivision development. That is, the property is divided into more or less equal sized lots, depending on the zoning district. And of course, open space benefits are lost because there's pavement, lawns, houses, and this is generally known as suburban sprawl. And it's been known for a long time that this is an environmental problem for the region. Back in 1996, Sherborn took a baby step toward remediating this problem by putting in place an open space subdivision bylaw. I say baby step because the lot size in this bylaw was set at least 1 acre. And it also required a special permit. So only a minority of the land was preserved as open space, and the fact that it required a special permit was obviously a disincentive because this bylaw has never been used to make a subdivision. But meanwhile, the state and environmental organizations have moved far beyond this, and they recommend what you see on the right, a true cluster subdivision that preserves open space benefits while still allowing, for example, in this example, the same number of houses that you would have in a conventional subdivision, but now clustered to preserve open space. So with the help of Mass Audubon and state guidelines, Sherborn's planning board is putting forth this open space subdivision revision that we think comes closer to achieving our goals. The highlights are this. Now open space subdivisions, cluster subdivisions would be allowed by right, so that removes that barrier to doing it. At least 60% of the property must be preserved as open space, and this would be permanently conserved. 40% would be for the houses and lawns and driveways. But it's important that the new bylaw gives a lot of flexibility as the state recommends. That is, the houses can be clustered in a way that fits the particular landscape. And it's important to understand that there are still controls in place. Concom and Board of Health rules still apply. There's protection for scenic roads. There is flexibility in the design, but the design has to meet certain criteria. So I need to mention here that there's a change in the warrant article. When we first made this open space subdivision bylaw, we intended to make a conventional sprawl subdivision to require a special permit to make a disincentive to that. But according to state law, we probably cannot do that in a legally defensible way. So both conventional and open space subdivisions would be allowed. Well, given that, why should a developer choose an open space subdivision over a conventional one?
Can you speed it up a little bit, Miriam? Thank you.
Okay. For the developer, there are advantages of lower infrastructure costs or friendlier town boards, and it can be marketed as eco-friendly. The buyer may prefer a pocket neighborhood with social connections and certainly easier maintenance, and they have permanent assured access to open space. And for the town, we still get some revenue and we get some of the housing we need, but we preserve our rural atmosphere. Thank you.
Thanks very much,
The planning board recommends a yes vote on this unanimously. We voted unanimously yes.
Okay. Thank you, Marion. Okay, so is there discussion or debate on this? Okay, if you would line up at the microphones, please. Jim?
Jim Murphy, Bear Hill Road. I'm going to ask you to join me in voting no on Article 22. Despite the hard work and well-meaning intentions of the planning board, it's not right for passage as is now proffered. It's inconsistent with the zoning that has governed our town since 1937. It permits multi-dwellings anywhere in the town, eliminates the now existing prohibition for such dwellings in existing residential A, B, and C zones. It eliminates the requirements for frontage on a road or a minimum lot size. It's in stark contrast to the other provisions that provided previously for subdivisions that have to be a minimum of 6 acres under either Section 4.5 or the EA zone. It allows shared driveways, and coupled with a lack of minimum frontage, it broadens the potential for the development of almost all landlocked parcels in town, which ironically will lessen open space rather than expand it. By allowing the combination of non-contiguous parcels, it allows the developer to propose open space on one side of town to concentrate development in another part of town. It is not tightly drafted and inserts new terms such as multifamily and duplex, where our existing definition uses a different term of multi-dwelling. It refers to a definition of a term called conservation analysis, asserted to be found in the planning board subdivision rules and regulation, but no such definition could be found by me when I searched it. It would eliminate the oversight the town meeting would have had over the Pulte Maple Street project and over the Trask Coolidge Street project, leaving everything solely in the relatively boundless discretion of the planning board. It create many unintended consequences by only offering 60% open space obligation, and it wouldn't give the town more than it is normally getting in a 2 and 3 acre zone. That it may appear to apply only to existing lots is not very much protection. There's nothing in the article that would prevent a creative land engineer from carving off a small part of almost any lot and thereby create a new lot, which could then take advantage of this program.
All right, Jim, that's 2 minutes.
Okay, Article 22 should not be adopted. It is not a small change to the procedure.
Thank you. I had, please, whoever cut that mic off, please don't do that again. Okay, we have somebody up the back. Lorelei?
Hi, Mary. Good evening, everyone. This is Lorelei Randa from 8 Cider Hill Lane. It sounds fantastic. I mean, as described by Mrs. Neutra, but I have just a couple concerns. It's like 3 pages that I've read over and over again and I still can't make sense of, and I think it's just, we're just rushing what sounds fantastic but might not make sense and people don't fully understand, that we leave it into the hands of 5 people to make pretty significant decisions for our town. Also, I was wondering if how the Board of Health felt, if they were consulted, and also the conservation, were they consulted when drafting the article? And
I'll just interrupt for a minute.
Sure.
Can you answer her questions there, Marion?
I'm not sure which question I
The
should.
Board of Health
if-
and Conservation?
Yeah, I'm sorry, the Board of Health, if they were consulted, and also
Yes,
the Conservation
we did
Commission.
consult with Board of Health, and if anyone from Board of Health is here, I'd be happy if they made their own statement on this.
Okay, we'll hear from them.
There is
Oh,
someone
great.
from Board of Health. As far as Conservation Commission, we didn't take this to Conservation Commission specifically, but we held a series of hearings and open meetings, quite a lengthy series of hearings and open meetings on all of these bylaws.
Okay.
As far as the 5 planning board members running amok with this, I think we were all elected for various reasons, and we're responsible to you who elected us. So we would definitely keep in mind the thinking that's gone into this from many, many people at our hearings and the feedback we've gotten.
Does that address, do you have additional concerns, Lorelei?
It does, and I don't want you to be confused that I don't appreciate the effort that you put in, and I'm sorry I didn't make the meetings, and I know that the town has elected you. What happens to the next board members is kind of, I mean, as you're re-elected, I'm sure we're elected, but it's a big decision, you can understand that. Thank you.
I'd make a very quick response.
Sure.
Part of our question. I totally understand your difficulty in reading through this. All of our bylaws are no fun to read, I have to say, but that's the reality. I forget what the rest of what I was going to say, so I'll wait and do it.
I'm going to have Rebecca address, if you will, from Board of Health.
Rebecca Honeywell, 104 Woodland Street. We all appreciated this article. I think there are a lot of really good concepts being presented here. We did not come to a vote because we had a lot of questions, and I think we were hoping to have the opportunity to discuss some of the complex potential issues that are hard to anticipate. I think what we're most concerned about is avoiding unintended consequences, which it would be better to identify. I think a concern is to make sure that this article, if put into law, doesn't obviate the process of review through this board prior to it, site planning, et cetera. There's a very complex review that everybody thinks is a pain right now, that's done in advance before vote. So I think we had a lot of questions, but we didn't have an opportunity to discuss it in more detail. So I really can't represent the board because we didn't vote. But I do think that we hope to have the opportunity to discuss it further.
So I have another commenter up here. So let's hear this gentleman. At the rear.
Yes, John Garrison, 33 Hunting Lane. I also cannot support this article as written. While I applaud the efforts of the planning board and the concept certainly of preserving open space in our town, which I think nobody would object to, the aspects of this that give me qualms are that in contrast to what Marion showed on the slide, that this requirement can be satisfied by combining non-contiguous parcels even in different zoning districts, and that the zoning board, again, a 5-person board, would be responsible, it's as of right, for making these determinations to override our current zoning. And there's some sort of averaging calculation, which again is difficult to understand. So for that fact, primarily, I would not support it. And I would just say, if we want to promote denser housing in town, we as a town should look at the town, say, where do we want it to be, and vote on it as a town. And I realize that we have a quorum here tonight, but I also think this is too important to vote at a lowly attended town meeting. That's probably not something that I have the decision on. I also had a question, and again, this is no criticism of the planning board. I just think this is too important a decision for our town to leave it in the hands of 5 people. There's also a phrase in there that I didn't see defined, and I didn't know what it meant, a density bonus. So if somebody could address that.
Okay, thank you. John, do you want to, or Marion, whoever?
Yeah, so to John Higley, 14 Saddlebrook Road, to address some of those concerns, I get some of those things. First, right now, this is a article to change the language we already have. Right now, a developer can come in and do a standard development using our zoning, or they can do a cluster, an open space development that is essentially 1 acre. So what we're talking about is changing that they can already do. The process for doing that, there's site plan review and there's special permit. Both of those go to the planning board. The only thing that doesn't go to the planning board is an EA development, which we've experienced as a town. The EA development requires a preliminary development plan that the town gets to vote on. The subdivision in our current open space language doesn't do that. So this isn't changing who gets to review what. It's not. It's the same process. The Board of Health and Conservation rules and regulations all apply for our existing standard subdivision or for our existing open space development or this revised new one. All those regulations would apply. I was at the March 12th, 2018 Board of Health meeting. There were no questions that were left or no questions that were asked that we were supposed to report back on. We answered everything. And let's see. So in terms of the frontage, we have a proposed amendment to address the concern about frontage. Right now, the language says that if you use a yield calculation, you have to show a standard development. You can't do more than that. So that already is in there, and that means including the frontage. The other method of determining how many units can go in there in this new language, which is approved by the state and Audubon, Mass Audubon recommends this. The other is a yield calculation, and we have an amendment to address the concern about does this open up us to any different development that can be done by our current methods that go to the planning board. So I can submit that amendment.
Okay, do you wish to submit that right now?
Yes.
Okay.
And you've got a copy of it. I'll read it. First is...
Excuse me, John. I just want to make an announcement that thanks to one of our very sharp citizens, Mr. Greg Kennan, his experience last night inspired him to contact me today to see if any amendments were made, if we could broadcast them live here. So we've made arrangements to do that. I thank Greg for his suggestion and his willingness to come up with a really positive contribution to the meeting. So Ben Williams over here is going to type in the planning board amendment right now, and you should be able to see what the effect would actually be, rather than just sort of listening to it. So I thank Greg again for that idea. It's a great idea.
Everybody is watching me type.
But don't be nervous, Ben, not at all. Oh, can we keep the lights up for a
Can we
minute?
get stage lights again, please?
So that Ben can, he's reading off a really difficult third copy of something. Do you want, here's Carol. Isn't technology grand?
Oh, no, I went,
Right, this amendment was to address the concern that there would be, there was a concern, I know, that there would be many houses clustered right on a scenic road. We've addressed that concern already by specifying that one of the limiting factors in the site plan review is the view from the scenic road has to be preserved. And there was another problem in this, that this addresses, that housing could be created in the back of a big lot with a very small amount of street frontage. That can be done right now with a conventional subdivision. All you need to make a conventional subdivision is enough room to put a 60-foot road into the land and fill it with houses. So essentially, I'm in favor of this, and I think the planning board is in favor of it too, because it is a good replacement of a conventional sprawl subdivision plan. It preserves 60% of the land as open space, and that land cannot be all wetlands. It has to be representative of the entire property. The alternative for a developer that's looking to do a subdivision is a conventional sprawl subdivision, which definitely loses a lot of open space. So
Okay,
it's a
so
choice.
we need to have the amendment made, so if you could read the amendment also.
That's good. So the amendment, again, is to address the concern about frontage and what lots can be
Right.
developed.
If you can just read the
Okay.
text.
So do you want me to read the entire section now as amended?
No, I just want you to read the amendment. If you
Okay.
don't have it, you can have a copy from up here.
Okay, under dimensional requirement, amend the frontage section by adding the word internal in the first line between requirement for and road frontage. Also, to add the following sentence to the end of the frontage sentence. The subject parcel must have as a minimum the frontage on a public way that is required in the zoning district in which it lies.
So is there any discussion or debate on the amendment This is not on the main motion, but on the amendment. Yes, Mr. Durensis.
Board of Selectmen has town council on this, and town council has okayed its.
I don't think it's Paul's fault. Whoever is controlling the mics, could you make sure that Mr. Durensis' mic is on?
We asked town council to review the amendment just now, and he has okayed its legality. The board has conferred here at the table and is in support of this amendment. We think it improves the article.
Thank you. This is a comment on the amendment, George? Okay, great.
I'm not a lawyer, but I'm just somewhat confused by all this legalistic language in this thing. We've had like 4 pages of this, which makes sense to people who understand it. But I think to us, the voting public, we need a simpler rendition of this before we can actually vote effectively on it. It seems complex enough at this point and unresolved enough at this point, so we really should defer this to another year. And give
This is on the, this is only on the amendment.
Okay. My comment here is that the amendment itself is somewhat confusing to someone without a legal background, at least to me.
Okay, thank you. Is there any more comment or discussion on the amendment? Richard, are you heading up here for that? Okay.
I just don't quite understand this amendment. I understand what you mean by there's no numerical requirement for the internal road and the frontage, but does the final sentence mean that there would be a maximum or minimum requirement of, say, 250 feet in Zone C for whatever, however large the parcel is that this is encompassing?
Thank you, that's a good question. The way this works, and zoning bylaws are difficult, so I appreciate everybody working on this. Democracy's good. In the previous section, it says yield allowable residential units. It has 2 ways to determine the yield. And one is you got to show what you can do with a conventional development. And you got to follow the rules of the conventional development. In that regard, that defines the road frontage. We have a formula for different, for zoning 1, 2, and 3 that define the road frontage requirement. So this says you got to meet that. And then the other method it shows under yield allowable is by a formula based upon the net acreage, and that takes that formula includes you can't use wetlands, you can't use steep slopes, and a lot of criteria. But it doesn't specifically state you got to follow the road frontage that you could do under a conventional development. So that's the key thing. So this amendment then says the minimum frontage on a public way that's required in the zoning district in which it lies. So that just means whatever our current zoning requires for that zone, that's what you got to do for this, for this open space cluster.
Sorry. Okay, thank you, John. The gentleman up the back, is this on the amendment?
On the amendment, Donald Crawshaw, 198 Western Avenue. For clarity, at present, the frontage relates to a lot. In red on the amendment, it says the subject parcel. Can you explain the difference there to me? Does that mean just this? Well, explain it to me if you would.
So the term subject parcel refers to the parcel that's to be developed, including the amount that would be preserved, a minimum of 60% open space. It includes the part that would be disturbed and developed. So it's that parcel.
So each lot in the development would not have
it's the
access?
entire parcel.
Okay, thank you.
Is there any other comment or debate on the amendment? Okay then. Oh, Susie?
Susie Wheelwright, 137 Hunting Lane. I have a question. I guess that there is allowing split parcels here. Does it have to meet the minimum frontage requirement on each parcel? on one parcel? That's my question.
Okay, I think John just maybe addressed that, but Marion?
I think he did. You're in a cluster or open space subdivision, the frontage on the internal roadways of the subdivision has to be very flexible, maybe very small, not the full frontage you would need in a regular conventional subdivision, because that's the only way to make a cluster subdivision. That's the only way to cluster houses around a small road. Does that answer your question? I'm not sure.
No, my question is, if this open space zoning proposal is allowed on two separate parcels, then what? Is there a requirement for frontage, or is the open space parcel, does it not have any sort of access road and therefore not have any requirement for frontage? I'm just confused about the separate parcels for development and open space. One for development, one for open space.
Right, you're wondering if the open space parcel has to have access. It does, any conservation restricted parcel has to have access for monitoring and for maintenance if it's a forestry parcel, etc. Yes, but it doesn't have to have frontage.
Doesn't need road, motor vehicle access.
No, it doesn't need a paved road into it. It needs access but not frontage or pavement.
Thank you, Marion. Jim?
Jim Murphy, I think Mr. Crawshaw brought to my attention when he mentions the word subject parcel. In earlier parts of the definition, there are other ways in which the parcels are described. You have two other choices in the other parts of this article. One is called the open space parcel, and one is called the developed parcel. And it seems to me that if in fact you're trying to talk about the subject parcel, which is a third term, you should either have both of them, if both of them apply, or one of them, if only one of them is meant to apply to the word subject parcel. It should either say the open space parcel, if that's the one, the developed parcel, if that's the one, or the open space parcel and the developed parcel, if that's what's intended.
I can answer that. I understand the confusion here, but it's taken out of context. When we refer to the subject parcel, we're referring to the part of the description where the development is all on one parcel, the subject parcel. In another section, we say that by special permit, and this would probably be a pretty rare exception, where a developer has two pieces of land or controls two pieces of land, and once one piece of land has high conservation value as determined by the planning board in consultation with others, and the other is in a site that is much more amenable to development, has much less impact, that the open space minimum of 60% can be met on the high conservation value parcel. It's only in that special permit situation where you're transferring development rights to one parcel that the distinction between the open space parcel and the developed parcel applies. Otherwise, it doesn't apply.
Okay, if there's no further debate or comment on the amendment, I'll take a vote on that. This will be a majority vote. So all in favor of the amendment as submitted and as displayed on the screen, please say aye. Aye. All opposed? Nay. The amendment passes. All right, back to the main question now. Yeah. One second. Okay, so we are back to the main motion now. In the rear, thank you.
Sean Goldstein from 3 Surrey. I just have a hopefully brief question just to clarify a little bit. If the planning board could just help me understand, my understanding was that most of the single-family homes that we have are on an acre or more because that's a requirement for our septic systems to guarantee our groundwater, right? So I just want to understand for these open space cluster developments, would they be subject to the same process and standards that we have for septic approvals? And I don't know, Rebecca, if this is best for you or for
No,
the
this
planning
would
board
be,
folks.
the sponsor of the article would address that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, the answer is yes. All of the Concom and Board of Health regulations will apply, and that may limit what you can do in its cluster development, but it definitely would apply because our groundwater is of utmost importance.
Thank you.
Okay. Someone else up back, and then we'll get to you, Roger.
Yes, hi. Neil Kessler, 43 Page Farm Road. I'm a member of the Conservation Commission, but I'm not speaking for them. I'm speaking as an individual. So first, I just wanted to say that I think clustered housing as a concept is a great idea. When properly applied and fit in with the sort of specifics of our town, I think it'll work perfectly. I do think that right now it's premature to approve this article, mostly because so far we haven't really been that involved as a Conservation Commission with this. And I wanted to just read to you from the draft Natural Resource and Open Space Plan for Planning Board that says that one of the goals to protect water resources is to develop large construction-specific regulations to protect the quality and quantity of groundwater resources by A, evaluating the need for new regulations that would reduce groundwater pollution at large commercial and residential developments, and B, develop specific strategies and regulations to control impact of dense development construction on water resources. My feeling is that we haven't done any of that stuff. The reason it's in the draft plan is because we don't have any regulations. So even though we're talking about how Concom and Board of Health are going to apply their regulations, they don't have any that address this kind of housing. If you have these kinds of clusters on contiguous lots, what is that going to do to water resources? I have an issue with the fact that it's saying that the planning board would determine determine conservation value when that's really something that's more of the expertise of the Conservation Commission. I would vote for this if we could work with the Planning Board and Board of Health to draft regulations that would be in lockstep with the zoning changes, but to do the zoning changes first, to me, is putting the cart before the horse, and so I can't support it. Thank you.
Thank you. Roger? I'm going to take someone down front here now. Roger?
Roger Demler, 169 Maple Street. I have a couple of questions, detail things. I don't understand the whole thing, but I did pick up a detail I need some clarification. In the yield allowance calculation, there's a section under net acreage calculation where things are not allowed to be counted. And one of them is the zone 1 of a public water supply. I think we should be encouraging putting public water supplies on this conserved land. And then there's another thing right next to that that says not allowed on the zone 1 and A. I don't know what A means in that sentence. And then later on, there's a question about not allowing antennas on this conserved land, and the question is, would we allow an antenna in a barn if it's essentially invisible, which is the current bylaw? Thank you.
John or Marion, do you want to address Roger's questions?
Mr. Demler pointed out in the yield section under net acreage calculation, you'll see you can see it says number 1, half of the acreage, number 2, the total acreage, and number 3, 10%. And you'll also see we struck out A, B, and C because we needed to switch it from letters to numbers, but we failed to correct in the number 3 sentence. It should read 10% of the remaining site acreage after the areas of 1 and area 2 are removed to account for the subdivision roads and infrastructure. So he's caught a typo, which is, so it should read, instead of area A, it should read area 1 and area 2.
And does that answer your questions, Roger?
Yeah, in the acreage calculation, the calculation would be made before anything has been built. So it means existing.
Okay, thank you. Susie?
Susie Wheelwright, Hunting Lane. A couple of points. We have always in this town, as far as I know, rezoned at town meeting for duplexes and multifamily structures to EA. So there is something in number 1, general requirements, that says duplexes and multifamily structures may be allowed by special permit. Someone stated that this would, I believe it was in Marion's presentation, that this open space zoning would allow assured access to the open space for people who live there, and that's not my reading of it. I would like clarification on that. Number 3, I think the planning board has said that this is more restrictive than the current open space zone, and I don't find that to be the case. I think it is looser and allows a lot of things, some of them, yes, by special permit, that the open space zone, as the planning board claims, is going to be looser. It's not going to be more restrictive than the current open space zoning. I think that all the things that people are bringing up here are really good questions and points. Some of them are little, some of them are big. It seems to me that more vetting is definitely needed. And if we're getting around to things that have to be, the planning board has to offer amendments on, it seems to me that proves, and Jim Murphy's statements did notice a number of those things.
Okay, Susan, I want to wrap it up, please.
This is not ready. This is a good concept that needs more work.
Thank you.
And I'd like to request a ballot vote, please.
We would need 50 people to stand for that at the time. Next comment?
Hi, I'm Sheldon Mirowitz from Maple Street, 32 Maple Street. I have a simple question, and that is that in the presentation of the idea, it said that there would be permanent access to the open areas. Now, how is that guaranteed? And what is meant by permanent access? What is meant by having a permanent open area?
Okay, John, do you want to, or Marion, do you want to, one of you want to address that question?
Just the last couple of questions, or the?
Yeah,
How about the question about permanence of the open area?
Sure. We all want to preserve open space. So this requires a conservation restriction. It requires a permanent conservation restriction on the land so that it can't be developed after, in order to develop it this way, you have to permanently conserve the open space.
What does it mean how do you make sure that it's permanent?
Well, there's state laws requiring either the town holds the conservation restriction, or a entity like a land trust, and it could be also by a homeowners association.
Right, but that's not laid out as a necessity. That's given as an option, but that's not laid out as a necessity. The question I have is really very simple, and that is that developers, once they get zoning and approval, can reapply for other
Okay,
approval.
I believe that the town planner has a response to you.
It would be a legally recorded conservation restriction at the Registry of Deeds. Once it's in that status, it cannot be developed. The only way, I shouldn't say never, the only way though is just like some of our current conservation lands and town forests, it would require a 2/3 vote of town meeting, and then it would have to go to the state legislature, and compensating land would have to be provided to.
So all that's
To trade.
required is a 2/3 vote in a town meeting like this? No?
And the state legislature and
Got it.
replacement land.
Okay.
A very
Thank you.
difficult process.
Thank you.
Madam Moderator.
Mr. Yan.
A lot of this warrant article is asking for approval for the deletions and additions to an existing warrant article. A lot of this is already covered and unchanged on pages 4 and 5 of the existing bylaw. The bulk of the changes are the additions on the applicability provisions, the amendment that we just talked about, and then a deletion. Everything else is an existing bylaw. The permanent conservation restriction is unchanged by this warrant article. And the description that Gino gave you is what applies now and will be unchanged if this warrant article is approved.
Wait, someone says not true?
Okay, so Addie May, you have a comment?
Hi, Addie Mae Weiss, 1 Jackson Road, and the comment was that this is, as Mr. Yan just said, that this is we're making some addition to a bylaw that's already in, I can't hear me, sorry, too short, sorry. This is asking for some amendments to a lot of language that's already in existence. And it also is not everything that is used to create a subdivision. We have a subdivision bylaw that has not been used for Cider Hill was the last one about in 1990. So this is not regarding individual house lots. This is purely for subdivisions, and the Board of Health regulations would still apply. The Concom regulations still apply. We, as a planning board, I know it took me a while to say, wow, we have restrictions and we say, okay, that's a lot. There's your setbacks, it meets this, okay, yep, it's a lot. It's not necessarily a buildable lot because it may not perk, it may not meet other requirements for water and septic, and you can't build on it. But it's a lot as defined by planning board. So setting the planning board guidelines does not necessarily, it doesn't supersede anything in our Concom and Board of Health. The other thing is by setting some parameters, it provides the guidelines for then Board of Health and Conservation to look at and say, okay, if this is a lot size, if we're allowing houses to be structured, and we are, yes, the intent is for, if you look at cluster development, cluster communities, a lot of them are not multi-family, they're not townhouses, and they're smaller houses, and they're positioned differently, but they're not necessarily connected. But if you have some parameters, then you can start doing your scientific studies and say what regulations would support maybe a shared septic. And that's the conversation that we've had with the Board of Health, saying, okay, if we have these opportunities, then would we be able to look into get the research to say, what, do we need to double the setback if you're going to have a shared than you normally would? And those things, I think, I guess it's chicken before the egg, which one first? To me, it makes a lot of sense if you have your parameters that you're working with defined, then you can go out and say, what would work? Again, we already have parameters set for house lots, and you may not be able to build a house on it because it doesn't work for septic and wells. So that doesn't change. That's the same now, and it'll be the same going forward.
I move to call the question.
There is no debate on this. I'm calling the question. But I believe Mr. Higley has a comment, a statement, not a comment.
The good thing is, I think we're all on the same side on this in terms of wanting to conserve open space. And I also understand the questions that people have.
All right, the question is called.
So the planning board would like to withdraw the article.
Excuse me. All right, there's been a motion to call the question. We will do that. Right. No. So, sorry. So there's a 2/3 vote to call the question. This is not a vote on the article. This is a vote to call the question. Right. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. All opposed? Nay. It's close here on a 2/3, so I'm going to go to cards. Did it fit? Yeah.
Why would you do that? Why would you shut down conversation? You don't want to be here until 11:30? Would that be why?
I think you'll be aware of why we're doing this. I think we're going to
Okay, I'm going to call for the vote now, but I want you to understand exactly what you are voting on, okay? We are voting now to stop debate on the article. So if you vote yes, vote aye, debate on the article will stop. There will be no more comments on the article. And then we will vote the article. But what you will vote for now is simply the determination of whether debate has ended on this article, and the next action then would be a vote on the article itself. Okay?
Madam Moderator?
Yes. Ms. Shepherd.
The chairman pulling the article off the floor, I consider debate.
In order for that to happen, the motion maker will need to make a motion to withdraw the motion.
He was in the process of doing that.
No.
And you said that when someone calls a question, there can be no more debate.
Right.
But is bringing the motion to pull the article considered debate?
It hasn't happened yet.
It hasn't happened yet.
If he stood up now and did it, would it be?
No, we have a motion on the floor to end debate.
So it is debate for him to do that, to say.
No, there's no debate of that kind of motion. We're done here.
Okay.
We cannot go to a vote without a second. Don't we need a second for the call? There was a second.
There was a second. Right. So, again, one more time. The vote that you are about to cast is a vote to end debate. If you vote yes, the next thing that will happen is that we will vote the article. If you, do I?
Folks, we're trying to get to a outcome that I think we all are looking for here.
So if I can allow that, I will. All right.
I had made a motion to call this vote at this point in time. I'd like to withdraw my suggestion to call for a vote at this time.
Okay, so you need to not withdraw your suggestion, you need to withdraw your motion.
I'm withdrawing, I would like to withdraw my motion to call the vote at this time.
Right.
Can I get a second?
And, okay, and now, before anything else, or before anyone else speaks, I believe that Mr. Higley wishes to speak. So we are back at the main motion. Now you can do what you said you wanted to do. Nothing else.
The planning board wishes to withdraw the article.
And so this requires a vote? The withdrawing of the article. Okay. Okay, so he didn't, excuse me, he did not, John didn't make the motion though.
I did.
So, okay.
I withdraw my motion to consider this zoning article, Article 22.
I move that.
I move to withdraw Article 22 from consideration.
Second.
And this will be a majority vote. All in favor of withdrawing. So what this means is that we will not vote on the article at all. The article just goes away. All right. So all in favor of the motion to withdraw the article, and this is a majority? Correct. Yes. All in favor of the motion to withdraw the article, please say aye. Aye. All opposed? Okay, that motion passes. All right, that concludes our business for this evening. And do I have a motion to dissolve?
Motion to dissolve.
Second? All in favor? Aye. Thank you. Opposed?